Hey guys, welcome to my game reviews, and today I'll be taking a look at Lame Duke for DOS. So Lame Duke is the oldest beta of Duke Nukem 3D, and it's a nice gift from 3D Realms to release this beta as freeware back in 1997, about a year after the original game's release. And like other betas of familiar games, it's an interesting look at how different the game was from what we eventually got. So to get Lame Duke, go to Google and type in Duke Nukem 3D Beta V0.99, and the first result that pops up should be like Duke Nukem RTCM files or something like that, and you can click on it, and it should be the very first file on the top of the page, and it works on both Mac and PC, and I suggest you run it through DOSBox. Actually, that might be the only way to run it. So now to the game. Once it's started, you press escape and the menu should appear. If you go to begin a new game, you'll notice you can choose from 4 episodes. Mr. Caliber, Mission Cockroach, Suckhole, and Hard Landing. Now I'm going to give a small summary of each level from each episode and talk about certain levels that are early versions of levels that would appear in the final game. So E1L1 is a very early version of Spaceport. I can assume this because of the ship flying around the outside of the level, and the fact that there's a spaceship docked in the room you start in. So E2L1 was a test level to see how well the train mechanic would work, and is the only level to feature protozoid slimers in it. I would say this is an early version of Rapid Transit, but there is another level that is much more similar. E1L3 is just a generic space level, although I think there is a big room full of meat hooks and severed arms. E1L4 marks the debut of the Octobrain, which are much creepier in the beta with their robotic tentacles. Also, I think this is an early version of nuclear reactors, since there's a big room with a huge reactor in the center. E1L5 is the level that I think is the beta version of Rapid Transit, as the train cart scene in the final game and multiple areas that the train drops you off at are reminiscent of the final game. E1L6 is an early version of multiple levels, like Red Light District, since you have the bar where you get the red key, and the strip club, which is completely devoid of strippers, although there is an animation of a man taking a swig of beer. There is a dance club room that is kinda reminiscent of the karaoke room in Raw Meat. It is also reminiscent of Hotel Hell. There is a part in the level that reminds me of the area in Hotel Hell where the secret level is. Heck, there's even a hotel in the level, but all the rooms are empty, but there are a few elevators you can ride. E1L7 is a big building with elevators that take you up 6 floors filled with enemies, and it's a pretty cool level. E1L8 is an unfinished boss level, and it's pretty boring. There's really nothing else to say about this one. E2L1 is a fun level taking place outside with lots of enemies in this runoff water river thing. E2L2 is a cavern-like level that has bats as an enemy, which didn't show up in the final game. I don't really like this level too much. It reminds me of something I'd find in a Tomb Raider game. E2L3 is a strange base level with water for ceilings. It's another kind of boring level, but it seems like it could be interesting. E2L4 is a very cool city level with a few buildings you can go into. This level reminds me of a few levels like Hollywood Holocaust, since one of the buildings you go into looks like a very barren version of the theater. It also reminds me of LA Rumble with the city environment. This is definitely the coolest level in episode 2. E2L5 is another space base with lots of corridors and some water parts thrown in too. E2L6, you start in a parking garage that eventually explodes, then you go down to the dark sewers, and this is just another boring level, unfortunately. E2L7 is an interesting level. You start outside a library type building that has a huge alien base under it. I'm going to guess that this would have been a boss level since it is the last level in episode 2. E3L1, you start out in the dark and you would think, oh, this is an unfinished level, but if you use the spacebar which opens doors and you start pressing around the room, you'll eventually open a door to reveal that you're in a prison. And yes, this is an early beta of Death Row. Even at the end of the level, you exit by the water, but you don't use a submarine. E3L2 is probably the most notable level. It's the level Derelict from the Duke Nukem Atomic Edition. The whole level is basically here, but almost all the rooms are empty. You can explore the room with the cranes and go on underneath the ship, in the water, and on top of the ship. And on one side, there's a pipe spewing oil into the water, hinting at the joke that this was the ship that caused the major oil spill in Alaska. E3L3 is basically a continuation of Derelict. I can confirm this with a glitch I accidentally found. If you go to hit this switch, you walk right through the wall and end up underwater. And you can surface and see that this level, which I think is an oil rig, is connected to the ship. And you can use your jetpack and get on top of the ship if you want. The actual level, like I said, is very reminiscent of Derelict and makes me think that this was supposed to be the level that would have been before the Queen level in the Atomic Edition. E3L4 reminds me of the end of Darkside where you find the monolith from 2001. And later in the level there's a very glitchy section submerged in water, so I can't make it far enough into this level for me to be sure that it has any solid evidence of it being Darkside. E3L5 starts out with a bunch of elevators you can use to go up into a very cool red and blue designed cave that soon takes you to a water area. And in case you couldn't tell, most of the levels at this point in the beta are pretty much devoid of enemies. In case you're wondering why I wasn't shooting anything. E3L6 is a huge base with lots of tight corridors, but the level is a very water-centered level since the base is completely underwater, and the only way to exit would have involved long periods of swimming and searching for spots to get some air, but it doesn't matter, in the beta you're invincible. E3L7 is just another giant steel base that actually does have enemies but isn't too exciting until you get to the part with the conveyor belts and cranes. That reminds me of the factory portion of Toxic Waste Dump. E3L8 is a very early version of the Overlord level. You are in the room with the waterfall and all the cocooned babes, but in the beta it's just a barren steel room with nothing exciting about it but a couple of elevators you can go up. E4L1 is another city level with lots of enemies and explosives. It's very fun, and apparently it was only a test level designed to test the jetpack physics, so if you use your jetpack, the enemies will use theirs and you can have an air battle with them. E4L2 is a very short, unfinished, and rather pointless level. You start in a concrete hallway with all these mirrors, and once you start walking, the place starts exploding, and you run out of the building, and that's it. E4L3 is another space station level, but this one is kind of fun. There are enemies for you to gun down, and if you use your jetpack, you can get into the air vents and explore them, which is pretty cool. You must also use your jetpack to get out of the vents. So E4L4 is the exact same level as E4L2, but with the palette swap. It's the same building blown up and you running outside. So now that we've talked about all the levels, let's talk about controls. The control button fires, Z ducks, A jumps, space opens doors, the number buttons cycle through your weapons, U unlocks doors, and T is used for cheats, but I don't think there are any in this game. W is used to warp wherever you want. F5 activates your jetpack. The shift buttons make you run. The directional arrows move you. And when you get to one of the elevators that let you decide which direction you want to go, you have to press the spacebar in combination with A, jump, or Z, duck. This took me a while to figure out. The enemies in Lame Duke are just as the name promises. They're lame. First off, you have robots, not aliens, which in my opinion is 10 times less cool. First you have the weak jetpack robots who go down real easy. Then you have the strong robots who take quite a few shots to take down. Then there's the Octobrains who don't show up very often and take 1 or 2 shots to go down. The Protozoid Slimers can't be killed with anything but rockets and maybe pipe bombs. The Bats are an easy one-shot kill. The Flying Robots are what I think might be a beta version of the Sentry Drone, go down with a couple of shots. Then there's the gun-wielding women, which might be a beta version of the Pig Cops, but I don't know. They go down pretty easy. And last are the Sharks, which are the same in the final game, one shot and they explode. Now let's take a look at your weapons. You have the standard pistol, which appears in the final game. Then you have the plasma gun, which I think takes the shotgun's place in the beta. Also, if you're a big aliens nerd like I am, the gunshot sound effect for this weapon is the sound of the pulse rifles or the smart guns from Aliens, but they added a plasma-like sound effect over top of it. Then you have the rocket launcher. Its spread is much larger in the beta. It takes up like 1/2 of the screen. I can see why they changed it. Next is the pipe bomb. The sprite for picking up pipe bombs is not like the final game where they come in a box or something. In the beta, the sprite is humongous, but they do the exact same thing in the final game. There are a few things in the beta that differ from the final game. First is the jetpack, which has a different sprite. The Holoduke shows up in a couple of levels, but is unusable. It has a very blocky sprite. There's an object that looks like a big bubble that you can pick up, but God only knows what it does. Then you have either the 6-pack of soda or the single can of soda, which I'm going to guess would have been like health. So that is Lame Duke. It's pretty cool to mess around with, especially if you're a fan of Duke Nukem, and you could download it no problem since it's free to anybody. Lame Duke is the earliest of 3 Duke Nukem 3D betas. I have the Duke Nukem 3D 0v.99 beta, which is just a beta for the shareware episode, and I will eventually do a comparison of that to the final game. And there's another unknown beta that would sit between Lame Duke and the .99 beta. You can see preview footage of it on YouTube, and hopefully one day we can all play that beta. Well, thanks for watching. Please check out my other reviews, and if you like music, I have some Mad Season, some Alice in Chains, and Nirvana live concerts on my channel. So please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.